Hi folks, it's Todd with Thrive, and I want to say thank you for choosing this particular training video. You are going to be blessed by watching this. We had the opportunity several months ago of interviewing Alyssa Patterson. Alyssa is the author of the best-selling book Until Heaven Parts Us, and in that book, Alyssa talks about a tragedy that she has lived through, personal tragedy. And she talks about how she navigated that and how she leaned into God through that process. It is an amazing story, and it was our privilege and pleasure to interview Alyssa and have her bring that story to our audience. So what you're going to see here is a recording of that interview that she did for us. Dive into it, lean into it, and enjoy our interview with Alyssa Patterson. Alyssa, thank you. Would you just take a moment and kind of introduce yourself without getting into the background just yet, but just tell people kind of where you live and who you are?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Alyssa Patterson, and I currently live in Georgia, Northeast Georgia, and I live with my younger sister, and we have a puppy dog named Hazel, and some chickens and some ducks. So we've got a little bitty baby farm over here, but it's fun.
Well, I know Hazel will be part of the story tonight a little bit, and the Chick Inn, which is the name of your place, and one of the chapters in your book, by the way. We're going to talk a lot about that. If you do not have your copy of Until Heaven Parts Us, we're going to talk a lot about tonight. I'm going to actually read a few lines from that book, so I've got it here handy. So, Alyssa, I talked about us working together and the privilege that I had to kind of watch you, as you formulated your relationship with Chandler, and I had the chance to kind of see you go through things, and I had a chance to see you speak, and I've had a chance to read the book, and I think what spoke to me were three really important categories that I believe will challenge everyone on the call tonight and anyone that may be listening to this recording after today. And we're going to talk about those. But if you would you kind of give the background? And I know there's folks on here that kind of know, some that don't. But if you would kind of set up the story of what you've been through, and then we'll kind of get into those three things. But let me leave it with you to kind of set up the background for us, if you would.
Sure. So I don't even know if you know this detail, Todd, but so I met my late husband, Chandler, on September 12th of 2019. And that was our first date. And I think I started my first day with Kemper was the 16th, I believe, 16th or 18th. So the evening before, it was a Sunday night. I had to be at the Alpharetta office on Monday morning, and we had just started dating. And I drove up to see him that Sunday night at Rabin County, and he drove me around and showed me his sweet town, and I got to meet his family, and that was like our second date. So we just went for it. But yeah, we fell in love really quickly. I tell people this because I think sometimes young people are afraid to talk about things that are like super serious before you go out, or even like your first couple dates or whatever. But Chandler and I talked about all of that like the first time we got on the phone. We were just very clear about our intentions, and he told me he was looking for a wife, and I was like, that's convenient because I'm looking for a husband. And we talked about our beliefs about God and how much we valued our families and our political stances, and some of those things that most people I think would consider taboo, but are really important, especially if you're dating for marriage. So by the time we went out on our first date, it was kind of just like, okay, well, is there going to be like a romantic chemistry? And there was. He was a firefighter for the city of Gainesville. And so, of course, he was, just big and strong and beautiful. And when we started dating, he had a conversation with my dad pretty early on, I would say probably within the first 2 weeks, and spoke to my dad about his intentions with me, and that he was looking for a wife, and that he wanted to marry me, even just a couple weeks in. And my dad said, well, give me a year, um, and as it turns out, he just became part of our family so quickly. And he and my dad had a really great relationship. And so Chan proposed after we dated for 11 months instead of 12. So, he got in with dad, and dad bent the rule a little bit there.
Hey, 11 months is close, right? I mean, it was almost there, right?
Was.
Yeah.
It was almost there. And then after that, we just knew we wanted, kind of a short engagement, because we wanted to be married, and we were ready to have a house and a family together. And so we were engaged for 9 months, and then got married on June 5th of 2021. And it was wonderful. It was all beautiful and perfect. And, I've incredible in-laws and such great family that will always be my family. And so it all kind of was perfect. And I didn't feel this way then, but it's like almost to a scary degree, like too good to be true, kind of. And so, the wedding day was beautiful and picture perfect. And, I wouldn't have changed a thing. And people say, something goes wrong on your wedding day all the time, but I felt like it was perfect. We honeymooned in Cancun for a week, and that was lovely. And we didn't do a whole lot except lay up on the beach and have some good drinks and good food, and we just rested after all the chaos of wedding planning and the just hustle and bustle of the wedding week. So I was out of work for about 2 weeks between the wedding and our honeymoon, and then I returned back to work for a week. And that following Saturday, which was the third Saturday that we got married on a Saturday, and then we were on our honeymoon, and then that following week, on June 26th, Chandler was involved in a boating accident and passed away. And I became a widow at 23 years old after being married for 3 weeks, which still sounds crazy because it is. And, I've met lots of wonderful women, very strong, beautiful women within this last year and a half, who are also widows. But I haven't met anybody that was 3 weeks. So, yeah, that's my story.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's hard. Good background for the audience, because it is at that moment, from that moment on, where I can't even verbalize. I don't even know what the right word is to say in watching you navigate through that. And I know one of the topics we'll get into tonight, you and I spoke earlier about this, was the topic of grief. And you had such powerful things to say just earlier today on the topic of grief and how you've managed through that. And I can say personally, because I was at Chandler's service and heard you give the most beautiful eulogy, and I'm not even sure that's the right word, because it was an honor, right? It was you were speaking about Chandler's legacy, and it was just so powerful. And you spoke even in that message about honoring that legacy, and even from that moment forward, you could just tell God's doing something. I know you wrote in the book, in those days and weeks even that followed, there rightfully so, were plenty of ups and downs, but you know, you were speaking so beautifully and so powerfully through God's truth. And I know we'll get into that a little bit as we talk about the grief. That's one of the three things that I mentioned, as we've kind of navigated through this, that I want to make sure we touch on tonight. There's two others, and I've got my notes here, but that's definitely one, dealing with grief. And I really want the audience tonight to be challenged by that, and anyone that may be dealing with something similar to that, and to hear Alyssa's words as we talk about it. Here's another one: drawing closer to God when times are the toughest. Because it would be so easy, human nature would be to turn and run, or to question his goodness, or to question his sovereignty. But you did the opposite. You drew closer to him even in the toughest of times. And then something that I read as I got further into the book was about your focus externally, and not having an internal focus on yourself, but knowing that you had a mission to carry out. And part of that was Chandler's legacy and telling his story, and honoring even the words he spoke the night of your, wedding rehearsal dinner. And I've had the privilege to see that video, and I've probably watched it 50 times. It's so powerful, and just to use those words and to retell that story. So that's the third thing, is you being externally focused. Again, so for the audience tonight, kind of take a deep breath. Those are the three things we're going to talk about: dealing with grief, getting closer to God, and being externally focused. Let me go back now that Leslie's camera is working. Leslie, if you want to wave to the audience, and I'll introduce my wife, Leslie. Leslie's dying to jump in with questions and conversation, Alyssa as well. But let's get into the first topic, and Leslie, feel free at any time to unmute and jump in. But I do want to start with grief, dealing with grief. And I just kind of wrote down some notes here. And as you and I talked earlier today, it really kind of came into picture what I wanted to ask you about, because I want to say this with the highest degree of sensitivity to anyone that may be going through something like this, even if it's been years and years and years ago, even if it came from a generation before. And I think that's something we have to remember, is that grief that is not handled properly can be generational, and it can manifest itself generations later, and those people, those generations later, don't know where it's coming from, and it's coming from the generations passing it down. And even as we talked earlier, Alyssa, I was a little hesitant to kind of call it that, because I want to be sensitive to people that are going through it, but you called it what it was, and you have the right to do that because you've been through it. Would you talk a little bit about kind of your position on grief? And there is a right way, and there are a couple of ways to go about it, and just kind of talk about the differences. It may be people that are kind of afraid to say, well, this is my way. I'm going to do it my way. And you're going, you know what? We kind of have a model for it. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the cliche that's used a lot, especially when it comes to grief, and this is something people don't know what to say. I've found myself speaking to other widows and I don't know what to say. So it's, even when you go through it, sometimes you're like, did I just say something stupid? Was that not the right thing? And so, but the cliche that gets used a lot with grief in particular is, well, everybody just grieves differently. And usually that phrase is used as a Band-Aid to put over some sort of reaction or response to losing a loved one that maybe is out of character, or not the most God honoring act. And there have been days and times where I have not handled my grief well. I haven't grieved perfectly, but one of the things that I said right out of the gate to my counselors, to my family, to my friends, was that I want to grieve well. Like, I want to do this the right way so that I come out the other side of this better and stronger and closer to the Lord, not weaker, not further from him. And, one of those characteristics that I think comes along with that is just abiding with the Lord, and being able to sit with him, even when you have questions about his goodness and his sovereignty. Because I told someone this recently, the person of Jesus has become such a close friend, to me, closer than he's ever been before. I just want to sit with him sometimes. But the God of the universe has gotten a lot more complicated. But that's okay. That's what Jesus is for. And we're not going to untangle all of, the mess of sin and grief here anyways. We're not supposed to. But I had a choice when Chandler passed away. And it was to allow Satan to take more from me than he already had. Or I had an option to not let him take my joy, my hope, the things that I could hold on to. And my dad and my mom, I think, are both on the call, but growing up, they always taught me, both of them, that, you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you react to things, and you can control your response to things. And so I think that played a lot into my dealing with grief too, in that, I can't control the circumstances around me. I can't control what happens to the people I love. I have no control over that. But I have control over how I respond. And me choosing to grieve well, to live in the sorrow when it came, but to allow myself to feel joy again as those moments have begun to spark back in my life, and not feeling, guilty about those things. That is a direct declaration to Satan and all of hell that you don't get to take anything else from me. He's taken enough. And I think that is like the biggest thing with grief in general, is that if you can say, no, you've taken this person temporarily from me, but you're not going to take my joy and my hope. That's mine.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Leslie, I know you're wanting to jump in. Let me throw this out, and Leslie, jump in and add anything to this. But Alyssa, what strikes us the most, that Leslie and I were talking about this earlier, and I think you and I talked about that earlier today when we were chatting as well. Let me phrase it as a question. Is there a sense that if you turn the page, so to speak, or if you go on with your life, that you're in some way disrespecting the person you lost, or in some way that, like, you almost feel like, I have to hold on to this, and I have to feel sorrow and all of that, or else I don't love the person? Is that true? Do you find that to be true? And I guess, or false, I guess, really,
Yeah, I think that's a feeling people definitely experience. I mean, I remember even within the first few days, well, I think the week after, it was all a blur. I can't remember the timeline. I think it was a couple of days after his celebration of life. It was 4th of July, and Chan loved 4th of July. He was a huge patriot. And so we all got together and went and watched fireworks. And I remember feeling like anytime I would laugh or smile, being like, I couldn't catch my breath, because it was like, can I be feeling this way right now? Under the my husband died a week ago, and I just laughed at a joke. So at first it felt really like audacious. Like, am I supposed to be feeling this way? As time has gone on, though, that's changed. Chandler was such a larger than life, joyful person. He was so wonderful to be around and just made me laugh every day. And I know he would want me to have that same joy. And I think that goes for anybody who's lost a loved one. They, we're still here. And as painful as that separation is, they would want us to continue to be joyful, and to be really vulnerable. Like, for people who have lost a spouse, that's something that's on my mind more these days, and moving on and dating, and it's unfathomable, but I'm 25, I'm always like, out of all of my friends and everybody I know, like, I just always wanted to be a wife and a mom. Like, I was so passionate about marriage at like 16 years old. Like, I wasn't going to get married, but I was like studying about it, doing my Song of Solomon studies. And I was like, this is what I want. And so I know that's just part of me. And it's just, that's a hard thing to reconcile with. Like, am I leaving him behind if I move on to someone new someday? But that's not true. And in that case, for widows or widowers and specifically, I've had other women tell me it's not like, we're not just capable of loving one person. Your heart just gets bigger and you love somebody else too, and you're able to hold both of those things. So.
Okay, housekeeping note to the audience, and then Leslie, jump in. I know you've got to follow up. To the audience, we promote these as 45-minute webinars. This one's going way longer. Just settle in. If you're at home watching, and if you need to log out at 45 minutes, everybody obviously is free to disconnect whenever you wish. But this one will go well beyond that. Leslie, let me shut up for a minute. I know you're dying to jump in.
Well, I am dying to jump in. I just want to first of all say I'm in awe of, I'm sorry, this is overwhelming for me, because at your age, Alyssa, I have to tell you that just the fact that you see grieving as a choice and how you're doing it is straight from the Lord. I mean, I'm 50 years old, 51, and I've never even thought about the concept of grieving well, or grieving in a way that honors God. So I can tell you already, just that statement that you made is going to make a huge difference in everybody on this call, because I guess I've heard what you've heard is you just do it, and everybody's different, and you got to do what you got to do to get it over it. And it's almost like a free pass to just give away your life. And I love what you said, that the enemy wants to come in and take more of your life, but we have to take a stand against that. And we have to say, no, I'm going to choose this. This is a choice. It may not feel like a choice a weekend, but it is a choice. Most of what we do is a choice. So I love that whole theory. I'm very curious if somebody taught you that, or was that something that the Lord just laid on your heart? Like, Todd and I were talking earlier, and I said, Todd, I've never even thought about this. Like, how at 23 did you know, okay, I can do this well, or I can do this wrong? That concept never even crossed my mind. So I'm very curious, did somebody teach you that? Did you learn that straight from the Lord? Like, where did that come from?
I think my answer is probably twofold. I mentioned earlier that my mom and dad always instilled in my sister and I, like, you can't control things that happen to you, but you can control how you respond to them. Like, you can control yourself. So I think that was just always simmering in the background of me and my life. And I think years before I even met Chandler, I was about 18 years old, and I started to read a lot of C.S. Lewis novels. He's my favorite author. And I read, I think it was one of the first books that I read by him, called A Grief Observed. And he got married much later in his life. I think he was in his 60s or so when he got married. He was never married previously. And he was from Oxford, and he became pen pals with this woman from New York, just like a, New York Yankee, fell in love with this guy from England. And anyways, they got married, and she got cancer. And so she passed away. They were married for about 3 years. And he published a journal that he kept after she passed away. He published it under a different pen name. He was known for a lot of other works like the Narnia series, Mere Christianity, Screwtape Letters, all of those books he had written. And so he was this great theologian. But if you read A Grief Observed, he's all over the place. Grief does that to you. It's not, there wasn't a mind map for this book. There wasn't an outline. Like, he just poured his heart out into this book and how he was feeling after his wife Joy passed away. And I always loved that book so much. It was my favorite. And I would tell people that before, I was 18 years old and I loved this book because he was a man who loved God and understood the intricacies of theology, but he still wrestled, when the love of his life passed away. His whole world just was shaken. So I would say literature and mom and dad and Jesus too.
Well, and Alyssa, I love that. I don't know if you can see it like we can see it, but I love that it's just a story of how God prepares us along the way for what's to come if we stay connected to him. So it does matter what we read. It does matter who we befriend. It does matter the shows we watch on TV. All those things are a chance to implant truth and preparation into our souls. And you didn't even realize that was your favorite book for a reason, but look that 4 years after that or 5 years after that, that book was implanted in your soul already. And so I just think it's such a testimony to staying connected with the Lord and how he prepares us for what's ahead, whether it be that day or the next year or 5 years from now. I just love that I can see God all over that. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Hey, I want to read a passage, and this is from page 10 of your book, Alyssa. So again, anyone out there that's not seen it, Until Heaven Parts Us, here's the book. You got to get it. It's on Amazon. I want to read this, and I don't know that I can read it without crying. And then we'll put a wrap on this first topic and go on to the second one. Here's what Alyssa says on page 10. In this journey through grief, I have learned to find comfort in the fact that this is and always was plan A. Now, think about that. For those of you listening on this call, the author of those words, who is writing about what she has been through and is calling it plan A. It's just absolutely amazing. She goes on to say, it's an odd comfort to find some ounce of assurance that this was always supposed to be. God knew when Chandler's last day on earth would be. And by divine design, he crossed our paths just in time to fall in love and become husband and wife before he would be called home to heaven. The ability for you to see that and to call that plan A it's just amazing. I think it's also an amazing sort of a segue into that second topic that I mentioned, which was turning to God when things are the toughest. Because here's what makes it even more difficult. And again, I want the people I want everyone on the call and who may be watching this years from now on the recording to hear this. The world teaches us everything opposite of that. Like Leslie was talking about, whether it's music, whether it's videos, whether it's movies, whether it's people that tell us lies. The world tells us to take care of ourselves, take care of number one, put ourselves first. My best life ever, or whatever the saying is, living my best life. I mean, all of that is self-centered, pride that puts ourself as the centerpiece. And I have to believe, Alyssa, that so much of the way in which you have worked through this has been because God has been at the center, and to make the choice to turn to him in something like this when times were so tough, again, is another testament to how you've handled this. Talk about that a little bit. And I'm sure it's also kind of relative to the choice you made, but in a world where we're taught to take care of ourselves as number one, how do you stay committed to turning to God and thinking of it that way?
To me, it kind of felt like my only option. That part didn't feel like a choice to me. I got saved as a teenager, and have just always really been into, I love apologetics and the the logic behind what we believe. So that all of this has challenged that even more for me. But grief, especially unique grief, that's sudden and tragic, tears you down physically, emotionally, spiritually. I was the most vulnerable version of myself. I'm a pretty small girl. I lost probably 10 pounds after I couldn't eat. I didn't sleep. I tried to work. I think I can say that. And I was just a shell of myself. And I write in the book, I was at a loss for words with the Lord, and I sometimes would just scream and yell and cry to him. And I think that's important for people to know, that, you don't have to clean yourself up or approach God in grief and be like, it's okay, and I trust your plan, and I understand, and of course God wants to be praised, but he understands grief. When Jesus goes with his disciples to visit Lazarus, Jesus weeps. He grieves with his friends at the loss of their friend. And I believe it's the Amplified translation, because that's what I read. It says he was angered at the grief caused by death. He was angry and crying. And I sat a lot in Lamentations early in my grief, because they're really honest, and they go from practically cursing God's name to praising him line by line. And that's right where I was. And so I think it's important, no matter what degree of suffering you might be going through, to know that God knows your heart, and he knows how we're feeling, because he came here as a man through the person of Jesus, and he gets it, is the easy way to say it. So, yeah. And in those vulnerable moments of really not knowing what to pray or what to say, sometimes it was like 100 times over all day long just to say, Jesus, help me, let me make it through the next 5 minutes, so.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, or whatever you want to call it, that I've heard from a pastor from the pulpit years and years ago, and it stuck with me ever since. It came to mind as you were talking. He said, as a pastor and someone who's got to speak and deliver a message, every Sunday, his output was only as good as his input. And so he had to commit to inputting, whether it was reading even prayer, because in prayer we can sit and listen. We don't have to be talking. We can sit and soak in and hear from God. And it kind of goes back to what Leslie was asking you before. And I think some of your conversation about that and how you handle grief was, you've not disconnected from the source. You've stayed connected to the source. And I would just challenge anyone that maybe has had a more difficult time, ask yourself that question. Alyssa here tonight is talking about reading scripture, and Alyssa's talking about prayer, and Alyssa's talking about, meditating and listening to God, and certainly telling God how we feel, but also knowing when to be quiet and listen. And I would think you would agree with and have done an amazing job with input, keeping yourself connected to the source, so that when I say output, meaning the way in which you go about your life and the way in which you leave home the next day and make yourself take that next step, whatever that may be, the input has prepared you and fueled you to be able to do that. Would you agree with that?
I would, but I would add that is different through your phases of grief. I have not had the same discipline that I maybe did prior, spending quiet time and reading the word, or reading books about the word, or going to church regularly. It goes back to the thing that grief just takes everything out of you, and it's hard to find those rhythms again. So it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be daily, in terms of, doing something every day. But I think if you're doing something, even if it's as simple as just a Jesus help me when you're going through the drive-through and the person ahead of you is taking so long. Calling on the name of Jesus is a really simple but powerful thing, and sometimes that's all you can do. So
that's so good. Hey, let me read another passage here. I've underlined a passage here that's kind of within our second topic, which is drawing closer to God. Leslie, I'll read this, and then if you have anything you want to add to this topic, feel free to jump in and ask. For anybody that has the book, did I show the book yet? Make sure everybody gets the copy of their book. I am on page 109, the bottom of page 109, for anyone that may be following along. Story time with Todd. Listen to this, though. Alyssa writes about drawing closer to God, even when it's hard. She says, Chandler will never be replaced. He couldn't be. No one who passes away should be or can. But I know, claim, and believe greatly that God is able to bless us anyway. God doesn't stop being good or righteous or just when we can't understand. He is still good. He is still sovereign. He is still advocating for us, even in our anger, sorrow, and unbelief. He is with you. He will bless you. Eternity by his side is the ultimate gift. And of course, in God's own way, our pastor this past weekend actually spoke about that exact topic. And he talked about, if as you go about your day, if you're not approaching your day with eternity in mind, you're misusing the resources God has given you. Let that sink in. If you're not approaching your day with eternity in mind, you're misusing the resources God has given you. And that's what I was talking about when I said, even in that eulogy, even in that moment that was so unbelievably hard, it was obvious that God was speaking through you, and you were thinking beyond just that moment. So you're unbelievable. Leslie, yeah.
Add something, sorry, real quick. Just in terms of honoring Chandler and continuing to carry that legacy forward, that was something that was important to me because I was his wife. I would have done it anyways, but one of the points of marriage is to come together with someone to build a legacy with that person, to leave behind you as you move towards eternity. And so it was my job to do that, with him here or not. But that part in the book, you read it, just pumped me up. Like, those things they run through at the beginning of a football game. I want one. Just want to feel it.
I believe it. I believe it. Thank you for adding that. That's really cool. Leslie, anything on this topic you wanna add?
Well, I wanted to ask Alyssa for her opinion on something. For everybody listening right now, I think life is hard. We've all been through those times where we thought, I'm not sure I'm going to get through the day, much less the month or the year ahead of me. What would you say before we move past this grief topic to someone who's in the middle of that? Like, I know when I was going through one of the hardest times of my life, somebody said to me, you're going to get through this. And just that one sentence was what kind of took me to the next level. What would you say to somebody who is either questioning the goodness of God? Because I know that's very common when we go through trauma. What would you say to them to kind of get them over that hump to start living again? Like, I know that that's kind of backtracking to the grief, Todd, but what would you say of a word of encouragement that can, something that can play over in their head that's just like, I'm going to get through this, or just something in those initial weeks of trauma that you don't know if you can get through the day? Is there anything that comes to mind, or anything about the questioning the goodness of God during those difficult times, how you got past that? Either of those two things that you could comment on?
Sure. So early on, in grief, everything just gets really muddied by what you're going through. So it's hard to see. I mean, it's still hard for me now even to picture a future or a life beyond what I've gone through for myself. But I think it's just taking it really a moment at a time. And, it's okay to sit in sorrow. It's good, actually, in grief, or in any kind of struggle. It's okay, so long as you're allowing Jesus to be there with you. Because eventually you have to have enough discipline. And maybe it's just as simple as a frame of mind to be able to say, okay, I've had my moment. I've had my 15-minute cry, or, I've vegged out for an hour and let myself wind down, but it's time to get up and it's time to do something else now. And I think our perspective and the talk that we allow to go on in our heads, which is fueled by, like you said earlier, the things you watch, the music you listen to, the things you read, those things matter. If you're scrolling on your phone all day, I think the young people on here will get what I'm saying, but like, you'll hear the TikTok songs when you're going to bed, like they stay in your mind. So if you're, listening to worship music or something else, or reading scripture, that's going to have the same impression on your mind and on your heart. And so I would just encourage you to change your perspective. And this is something I've been challenged with recently too, in thinking about my future and my life beyond this, and what does that look like, and allowing myself to be hopeful is a big deal. And it's the inner dialogue that goes on inside my head. If I say in my head, oh, I could never get married again, I'm never going to be a mom, I'm not going to have those things, I won't do it, I can't have it, I can't imagine it. If that's what I'm telling myself all day long, that's what I'm going to have. And so I've just been challenging myself lately to think differently about that and other things too. Just, the way that we speak to ourselves in our mind affects, the way that we live our lives and how we're going to get through the next 5 minutes or the next year. So be kind to yourself.
Gosh, you should write a book. I mean, oh, wait, this one, everybody, this one. That's a self-talk matters. Self-talk matters. What a powerful.
Yeah, Todd, it reminds me of that verse in the Bible: as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. We have a lot more control over our outcomes than we think. And whatever we do think about all the time becomes our reality. So I love that you said that.
Yeah. And hey, Alyssa, there's kind of a, I'm looking at my notes here because I think it's a good segue to this third topic. I'm looking at what page number it's on, but if I remember right, you actually had kind of a phrase you used over and over again: get up, make a choice, chase the promise. Talk about that, and maybe that'll segue in. Remember, the third topic, everybody, is about being externally focused and getting up and doing something and making that choice. Alyssa, talk to the audience about that phrase. How did that come to be? And maybe that'll segue into this third category.
Kind of a cool, funny story. I think it all, and this is all really connecting in my brain right now as we're talking, which is funny, but the things that we're meditating on daily and the way that we're speaking to ourselves pours it all over your life. And so I was finishing up college. I was nannying for a family here in Georgia. I was finishing my degree online in communications. And so I was, in between working on schoolwork and driving to and from my nannying job. And just for a couple of days, I just had this phrase running through my head that was get up, make a choice, chase the promise. I didn't have anything big on the horizon. I was just a college student, and it just kept singing to me in my head over and over. And I've done this other times in my life too. Like this is random, but my girlfriend sent me a picture of her house this last winter. It was covered in snow, and it was like just the cutest thing. And I couldn't get it out of my head. So I was like, I'm going to paint your house. So I painted it on a little cardstock and mailed it to her. And then I started drawing other people's houses. So I kind of went down a rabbit hole. But if something sticks in my brain and won't go away, it's like I just have to get it out, whether it's writing it down on paper or painting it or whatever. I've got to get it out. So I had this phrase, get up, make a choice, chase the promise, all the time, just all through my head. And I was walking through an antique store one day, and there was like a piece of, I could have done show and tell. It's downstairs. It's okay. A piece of like trim or antique baseboard. It was kind of like this tall and about this wide. And I was like, well, I'm going to just put it on here, I guess. So I took it home with me and put stuff on it to hang it. And right next door, there was a Hobby Lobby. So I went in there and grabbed some paint supplies and got home, and I was living with my parents at the time. I went and sat in the basement and got to work and just sat there with my coffee and scrambled under the basement steps to get some random cans of wood stain and painted it out. And everywhere I moved, it was in a house I lived in with a roommate while I was finishing up college. It was above my bed. When I moved back home with my parents in between then, it was in my room above a mirror that I could see every day. And then when Chandler and I purchased our home, it was in our living room, above our couch and some windows. And now it's in my bedroom. So it was just always a thing that I had, and always kind of dwelled on that. And so when my life came to be what it is now, that was just another reminder. It was staring me in the face in our living room. And it was kind of just one of those things, eventually I was like, gosh, I'm right. Like, I need to get up. I need to, so it was a reminder for myself and encouragement to get up, make a choice, to choose Jesus in the midst of my suffering and chase things that he promises us. So
that's powerful. Alyssa, I've got one more question for you, and to the audience, a couple of reminders. We are going to have a short Q&A here at the end. If you guys want to drop any questions in the chat, we'll get to those in just a minute. I know we're at the hour mark, so if any of you guys need to log off, remember it's on your own. Don't worry about it. Nobody will even know. Feel free to log off and go if you need to. But I do have one more question, and then we'll get to a short Q&A. Alyssa, you write about abundant life, and you talk about, you know, being externally focused and getting up and making a choice and those kind of things. I know one of the things that's happened in the days since, and even somewhat recently, is the Dude 21 Foundation. I want to make sure you talk about that. Let the audience know kind of what that is and some of the cool things that have happened, you know, around that.
Yeah, so the term Dude 21 was coined by the guys from the fire department. Chandler rode engine 21 at Gainesville Station 1, and he said dude a lot. We had a couple of conversations while we were dating and even newly married where I was like, can you please not call me dude or man? Like, I am your wife. I am your woman.
Hey, we've lost a little bit of volume from you, Alyssa. I don't know if something covered up or if there's a connection, but okay.
Am I good now?
Yep, should be.
So anyways, Dude 21 came from the guys at the fire department, and just within the last couple of months, you know, my family and Chandler's family knew that we wanted to do something to continue to carry his legacy forward as a family. So my father-in-law, Breck Patterson, and my dad, Russ Stroner, and myself, and, you know, with the help of both my mom and mother-in-law and sisters and friends and family, we've all kind of come together to create the Dude 21 Foundation. So with the funds that we'll raise, we are hoping to fund continuing education for first responders. Chandler's goal was to become a fire marshal. So he was preparing to take some classes to get a certification and all of that. So we want to support other men and women who might have similar ambitions. And then the other part of the foundation is just going to be to help support the parents, widows, and children of fallen first responders in whatever need might arise. We're not entirely sure how we're going to organize those funds yet, but we just want to be able to serve them. So we have our first major event, Be Praying, which is a golf tournament here in a couple of weeks, or next week, actually next Tuesday. So a week from today. And we're really excited, and just, it's been really rewarding to see some fruitfulness come from all of our pain, and just allowing, it goes back to the choice, right, of allowing this to become something bigger than ourselves and our grief and self-pity that we could have, and just saying, no, I mean, Satan has taken enough, and we're going to use this, and we're going to give to others. So
Amazing.
dude21.org is our website, if you want to check us out.
Yeah, in fact, a last call for anyone that wants to drop in a chat. And while you maybe, if anyone wants to write in something, Alyssa, give everybody a couple of different ways they can contact you. So you just gave the website. If you'll give that again, and also maybe your email address or your Instagram handle, whatever. How can people find you and find the book?
Sure. So the Dude 21 website is dude21.org. We also have a Dude 21 Foundation Instagram. It's just Dude 21 Foundation. You can purchase the book on Amazon. Just search Until Heaven Parts Us by Alyssa Patterson. And my email is alyssapattersonwrites@gmail.com. And my Instagram is Alyssa Patterson Writes, because that's what I do. So yes.
All right. Well, we did have a question come in. Thank you. Can people like me who live in Ohio help in any way? Alyssa, you want to take that one?
Sure. This is a family friend of ours, Caroline, who we used to be neighbors with. Caroline, I would say go follow the 21 Foundation Instagram, and we will post if there's any way that you can help us out. But just continue to share about the Dude 21 Foundation on Instagram. That would be super helpful.
Yep. And step-by-step ministry as well. These monthly webinars are hopefully a blessing to you guys. I know without a shadow of a doubt, tonight has been for sure. So last call on any questions. Looks like I think folks are processing the way God spoke to them tonight, which was the prayer from the beginning. So Alyssa, you are inspiring, you're encouraging. Thank you for your willingness to share and to teach. Oh, Hazel. Thank you, Russ. Is Hazel nearby, or is she?
Okay, she's not with me because last time I did one of these things and I let her stay by me, she was a terror. So I put her downstairs with my sister. So Daddy, she's with Ava. Ava's downstairs.
That's awesome. That's
Hey,
awesome.
Alyssa, before we go, do you have a picture of you and Chandler? Because some people haven't even seen what he looks like.
Alyssa, do you want me to share what I've got in the PowerPoint?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yep. Let me close this chat. Where's the shoot there?
The most handsome, to be prepared.
Okay. There we go. So there's a cover of the book and there's a couple of pictures there.
Yeah,
Thank you for saying that, Leslie.
That first picture was green was 2 nights before we got married. Rehearsal dinner night. We did like a little welcome reception for everybody that Thursday night, and then the second picture is when we got engaged. Sweet days.
We had one other question come in, Lisa. Is the book available by audio? I have a friend up in Northwest Alabama, Muscle Shoals, and he struggles to read really well. So I'm kidding, Derek, I'm kidding. But can you get it by audio?
I don't have an audiobook version yet. Part of it is because I'm stubborn and I'm partial to people holding them in their hands. But possibly eventually I'll have an audiobook.
I'll read it to him, Derek. We'll set up story time with Todd in the mornings, and I'll call you and read it to you. All right. Well, we're well past the hour. Thank you, everybody, for hanging on and staying with us with what has just been an amazing hour or so of inspiration and encouragement. I cannot thank you enough, Alyssa, for your willingness to share and just impact our audience. Not only people that were on tonight, but people that will hear this for years to come. So Leslie, any final things you want to add or say? You good? Okay. Thanks everybody for joining in. Alyssa, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.